Morning Year 12. This PowerPoint presentation is going to go through the objectives of financial management as well as the interdependence that finance has with the other key business functions. When I look at the first one that it says, explain how short-term and long-term financial objectives may conflict, that's one that we're going to focus on in a few slides' time, because we know that there's definitely a conflict there, and the conflict is amongst the different stakeholders. So as I said, today we're going to go through these. So we're going to look at the objectives of financial management, and we're going to look at the profitability, growth, efficiency, liquidity and solvency. And they're the objectives that your financial ratios are based on. Then we'll have a look at short-term and long-term goals, and then we'll look at the interdependence with the other key business functions. So this slide, again, just recapping what we're going to do today. So yesterday we looked at the strategic role of financial management, and today we're going to look at the next 2 points that we can see here. We do need to be aware of the 5 financial management objectives, and I need you to learn each one of those, and I need you to sort of understand what does each one of them mean, what's included under each one, and how is it actually going to help the business in the short term or long term to grow. So if we start looking at the first one, so objective 1 is profitability. Now this is, I guess, the one that most businesses want to achieve. You want to maximize your business's profits, and you've got to think about how you're going to do that. You're obviously going to monitor the revenue, so the sales that come into the business, and then you're also going to try to minimize your expenses so you can actually get the maximum profit within the business. So back to the profitability again. Profitability is the most recognized financial objective and refers to the ability that the business has to maximize its profits. Obviously, we spoke about decreasing your costs and expenses, and there's different ways that you can do that. Are we going to look at cost leadership? Are we going to look at expense minimization? So these are the things that are going to definitely come up later on. Now, with profitability, we measure that through gross and net profit ratio. So what I was telling you the other day, it depends on which financial statement we're using in terms of which statement we need to answer or to calculate certain ratios. Now, the profitability comes from the income statement, because we know back from year 11 that the gross and net profit comes from. So what we've got here is a McDonald's case study, and obviously McDonald's always looks at how are they going to ensure that they increase their profits in the long term. So I guess with that second point we're looking at, McDonald's offerings of a more diversified menu through the premium burger range and value for money items has resulted in the average greater spend per person to be larger. So that's where you can see that actual increase in their profits in the first dot point. And this is the kind of things that the business tries to do. So their loose change menu is a massive one. So they know that if they've got cheaper items, people are going to spend more, which means that they're eventually going to make more in the long term. So with financial objective 2, which is growth, this is looking at increasing the size of the business by effectively using financial resources. So there's different ways that a business can grow, and some of the ways that they can do that is increase the physical size of the business, increase the value of the assets in the business, increase sales and profits, increase market share, open more branches. They might expand within Australia or overseas, take over or purchase a competitor, so undertaking a takeover, merging with another business in the same industry, diversifying to buy other businesses in different industries. So I guess what you're doing there is, if one industry is not working, then you've got a bit of a fallback for your other ones. Or you can expand the business's range of products. So if you see that one product's a little bit slow moving, then if you expand into other products, then there's obviously a larger pool of customers. So these are all the different ways that a business can grow. So if you got a question like this in the HSC, you could start talking about this, even if it was in a business report. And if you were asked in a business report, maybe how they can grow, how a business can grow, these are the kind of things that you would talk about. And then you'd be specific in terms of how they would do that. So if it was something to do with the fitness industry, buying another gym. If it was diversifying into other products, it might be putting in some fridges with food there at the gym. So when people go to the gym, they've got that one-stop shop. So think about it in that way, depending on what the stimulus is and what's expected of you. This case study looks at Hyundai and how Hyundai's grown. Now, I think when we're looking at Hyundai, we're looking at the fact that they're offering the extended warranty. More and more people are buying their cars. So they're in the same category as Toyota, Mazda, and they're quite reliable in that sense. So we have seen a growth within this brand. Our objective 3 is efficiency. Now with efficiency, this is how we are going to minimise our costs while maximising our profits by using the least amount of resources. So we're looking at how can a business actually do that and be as efficient as possible. So I'll just go through some of these dot points. Efficiency is related to profitability because a business will be able to increase its profit when it can decrease its costs, absolutely. In service-based businesses, the largest expense is usually the wages and the salary of staff. So I think what we're looking at with that one there, can we have the least amount of people within a shop to actually get the maximum output? Efficiency may be calculated using the expense ratio, and we're going to look at that later on when we are looking at our ratios. Efficiency is also gained if a business can achieve the same level of profit from a smaller amount of input. But again, we have to make sure that we're not compromising on quality here. Another measure of efficiency is the business's ability to collect its accounts receivable. Now, our accounts receivable is the money that's owing to us from from stock that we've given our customers. So if we're not going to chase those accounts up, we're not going to be very efficient because we're going to have a lot of money that's sort of sitting out there that is owed to us. When we get into our ratios and we look at the accounts receivable turnover, here we're calculating how many days on average does it take customers to pay their invoices back. Now, if we have a 30-day credit policy, but it takes people 60 days to pay, we're not being very efficient. And the last one, the shorter the average time, the more efficient the business is. So if our credit terms are 30 days, but it takes us 10 days, it means that, people are paying us. So we're actually in a really good position, and, it's going to be beneficial for the business in the long term. So with our objective number 4, we're looking here at liquidity, and liquidity is about the business being able to meet its financial objectives in the short term. So here we're looking at less than 12 months. Short term is less than 12 months. And I guess when we're looking at liquidity, we look at the analogy of an ice cube. If things are flowing, it means there's a lot of money flowing around. But once it solidifies and it hardens, there's less money that we're able to access within the business. In regards to the liquidity, if we look at that second point, the business must have a sufficient cash flow to pay day-to-day expenses. And we also need to be mindful, you've got a cash register. You can't just be taking money out whenever you feel like it. You've got to make sure that the money is going where it sort of belongs first off. The last one, it enables a business to take advantage of opportunities such as getting cash discounts on purchases, large-scale purchasing, and giving credit to customers. Now, by getting discounts from your suppliers, that's more money that's in your pocket. Large-scale purchasing, we're looking at economies of scale. So the more you buy, the cheaper it's going to be. But we also need to be careful, though, that you're not buying too much stock that you're not actually going to sell. And the last one, giving credit to customers. Now, by giving credit to customers, the advantages, I guess, there would be that they'll probably buy from you. Whereas if you're not giving credit to customers, they might just go to the next person that actually is doing that for them. This case study here on Topshop, this case study at the moment could be any business because we're seeing that a lot of businesses are having liquidity problems, especially with COVID-19. They're just not making any money. People are not walking into the stores. There's, mounting expenses. You go to a Westfield now, or let's say you went yesterday when Myer was open, you would have had more staff than you would have customers. And that they're expenses that these businesses are having to pay. So what they've done, they're not paying their staff, they've stood down people, and that way they can try to get a little bit on top of these mounting expenses. So the last objective we're looking at is solvency, and solvency basically is the ability of a business to meet its financial commitments. So this is where we're looking at how much debt to equity does the business have within their establishment. And if we look at this last point, too much gearing increases the cost of finance and the amount of income committed to interest payments. So when we are looking at the debt to equity ratio, we're going to look at how much debt does a business have and how much equity does a business have. You don't want to have so much more debt than you do equity, because obviously the business is going to be highly geared. When a business is highly geared, they owe too much money. When a business is lowly geared, they don't owe a lot of money. And that's obviously going to be a good thing in these times now with businesses, and they're the ones that are going to survive longer, the ones that have less debt. So what we're looking at here, sorry, I should have had this slide previous, but again, solvency is the ability to meet financial obligations in the long term. So like liquidity was the short term, solvency is the long term. This shows risk in the business. Again, capacity of the business to repay that long-term debt, and are they able to do that? The next dot point in your syllabus looks at short-term and long-term financial management. And when we're looking at short-term financial objectives, we're looking at operational and tactical. So we've looked at this before in year 11, but operational is your daily and weekly. Tactical is your 1 to 2 years. And then you've got your long-term, which is your 5 years or more than 5 years. And what we're looking at here, you start with your 5-year plans and then you work backwards. So what are you going to do day to day to actually get to that long-term goal? Now, when we're looking at these goals, what are some examples of them? When we're looking at long-term goals, it might be to increase your profits by 50%. That's not going to happen in a short-term or tactical or operational goal. But over time, that's sort of where you want to get to. Now, with our short-term tactical or operational goals, this is where you might hire more salespeople, replace equipment, adopt new technology and programs. So these are the kind of things you can do in the short term in order for you to actually achieve the goal, which is your increased profit of 50%. So this is a question that we could look at, and we'll be able to answer it better when we look at the next couple of slides, which looks at a case study on Wesfarmers. Now, what could be some potential conflicts between short-term and long-term objectives? And again, that could be a question that you get asked in the HSC. And I think what we're looking at here is, people want the money in the short term, but they're not thinking about the long term. And these are some of the conflicts that can exist. So I'll read through this, with you. Businesses will either sacrifice short-term goals for long-term gains or long-term gains for short-term benefits. Wesfarmers, who owns Coles, Bunnings, that should be Officeworks, and Target, announced it would sacrifice short-term profit growth by reducing prices across their retail businesses in order to guarantee long-term sales growth and shareholder returns. In order to stay competitive, the company will continue to cut prices, which will result in less profit in the short term, and this short-term sacrifice should, however, lead to long-term growth. And a lot of these businesses here that we have above, you've got Coles, which is prices are down, Bunnings, who is the cheapest, I guess, in that hardware market, Officeworks, that's really one of their slogans, best prices, and Target obviously offers those cheaper prices. So if we continue now with this case study, according to the managing director, we'll continue to invest in pricing. If that moderates our profit increases, That's fine as far as I'm concerned, because we'll build strong business. We will always run the business with a long-term view. It would be easy to pull some levers and increase short-term profit, but this would be bad. Something we've never done and never will. We won't do what the UK grocers did and focus on short-term profits, because in that instance, they're obviously going to end up with a big problem. Coles and Bunnings could up their prices, but again, that's going to make them suffer in the long term. And here I want you to have a think about what kind of conflict is discussed in the extract on the previous slide. So have a think about that, write an answer down, and if you've got any issues, just let me know. Okay, this is the section that I think a lot of you struggle with, and when I look at the past HSC results, this is a question that's not done very well. Now, when we're looking at the interdependence between finance and the other key business functions, how does finance and marketing rely on each other? How does finance and operations rely on each other? And then how does finance and HR rely on each other? And over the next couple of slides, we'll look at that. In a nutshell, finance relies on marketing to generate funds. So the more things that the marketing department, I guess, markets, produces, sells, the more money the business is going to make. But on the other hand, marketing also needs to know how much money is the finance department going to give us and what's that scope that we have. An example there, budgets developed for different components of the marketing plan and relevant strategies in order for them to be implemented. So these marketing strategies are judged using financial criteria such as sales, market share and profitability. So is it going to be in their best interest to actually provide funds for particular strategies, or is it just going to be too hard and those strategies have to get scrapped? With human resources funds to remunerate staff, as well as funding effective human resource strategies, so training and development. So that's a really big one. You need to ensure that your staff are happy. Happy staff are staff that will stay in an organisation and feel that they're supported. So that's where your finance comes into it, or HR, I should say. Then the HR department then provides appropriate staff in order for them to be able to increase that finance element within the business. And the last one is operations. So I guess with operations requires funding to actually make the product, to be part of the transformation process. Budgets and cost controls are also required, so that way we know where particular money is needed or where a lot of money is being spent, and that could then look at how we're going to minimize these expenses because maybe they're being insufficient or not working to their potential.